This is Green Street, the Environmental Health Show, greenstreetnews.org, Patti and Doug Wood, and our worldwide network of experts. Thanks for being with us today. A new Australian study shows that over 26 million adults in Australia, Canada, and the United States are likely to experience health problems resulting from their exposure to wireless radiation from cell phones, cell towers, smart meters, and other wireless devices. That sensitivity, often referred to as EMR syndrome because of the constellation of symptoms that can result from exposure, is affecting a growing segment of the population. In the 3 countries included in the study, men were found to be more likely to experience symptoms than women, especially younger men aged 35 to 44. And perhaps not surprisingly, the study also showed a correlation between people with multiple chemical sensitivity and RF sensitivity. Today on Green Street, we'll talk with the author of that study and what it means for individuals, government regulators, and the wireless industry. But first, some of the headlines of the week. Patti, you have any good news for us this week?
Well, this is possibly good news.
Okay.
Not sure yet, but we'll find out.
Okay.
Scientists have developed a new material made from cellulose that matches some of the performance characteristics of fossil fuel-based plastics, while remaining highly recyclable, according to a new study published in Science Bulletin.
Well, that sounds like really good news.
Yeah, the new product, which is called Celluplastic, is a film made of cellulose derived from wood that is transparent, colorless, and stretchable, unlike many existing bioplastics. In laboratory tests, cellulose plastic matched traditional plastics in terms of strength and resistance to strain. The makers claim that Celluplastic can be recycled via a water-based process for over 100 cycles without losing its stretchability or strength, but is limited to applications where direct or prolonged exposure to water is not required.
Does it have plastic components in it? I mean, does it have fossil?
Apparently not.
Okay.
Apparently it doesn't have any fossil fuel-based components.
Unlike some of the other bioplastics, right?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. So the product is currently only produced at the lab scale for now. Plastic production is projected to continue to increase rapidly over the next few decades, reaching more than an estimated 2.5 trillion pounds by 2060. Proposed regulations to limit or even decrease the production of fossil fuel-based plastics have been met with strong resistance from plastic and petroleum-producing countries around the world, who argue that better recycling is the solution to the plastic problem, putting the burden on consumers to solve the problem. You know, recycling plastic is inherently toxic. Let's just say that, okay?
Sure. Yeah.
It concentrates or generates toxic chemicals, including byproducts, in other words, new chemicals during the process, which is heating it.
Yeah, because you're burning it, right?
Right. So recycled plastic contains more hazardous, substances than virgin plastics, including things like PFAS and phthalates and flame retardants, et cetera, et cetera.
So as you try to recycle plastic, the toxins get more and more concentrated.
That's correct. And it makes new toxics. Yeah.
The celluplastic is good news. The recycling plastic is not good news.
That's
is that where we are?
That's right.
Wow. All right. What else you got?
Well, this is a really, really interesting article, and this is from The Conversation, which is an online source written by 3 scientists from Penn State.
Okay.
So it's a really long article, but I'm going to try to give you a sense of it here.
Okay.
And the title of it is Microplastics Are Everywhere in Pennsylvania's Water, but the Tide May Be Turning. Professors of environmental engineering, geography, and environmental studies and oceanography at Penn State recently led studies mapping how microplastics move through bodies of water across Pennsylvania. What they found was striking. Microplastics are everywhere. Their concentration in sediment has been doubling every 20 years, and some of the most common types are among the most toxic types. Today, more than half of plastic waste ends up in landfills, and less than 1/10 is recycled globally. The U.S., this is really interesting, the U.S. generates over 48 million tons of plastic waste annually, of the 57 million tons of global waste.
So we're by far
the
major
largest producers of plastic waste.
Because we're not even trying, right? We're really not trying.
100%. And approximately 86% of this is sent to landfills. That's ours, right?
Yeah.
So the domestic recycling rate is roughly 5 to 6%, making the U.S. a leading producer of plastic pollution. Wow. Hello.
Wow.
The rest enters the environment where it breaks down slowly, potentially over hundreds to thousands of years, into microplastic. And these particles range in size from 5 millimeters which is about the size of a pencil eraser, to
Okay.
1 nanometer. And just for reference here, a single strand of human hair is about 80,000 nanometers wide.
So if you
You're
took
talking about 1 nanometer.
All right, so if you took a human hair and split it into 80,000
80,000
pieces,
pieces.
that's how small these things are.
That's how
no
small
wonder they go
nanoplastics.
through cell walls when they get inside a human
100%.
body.
Microplastics are now found in the air, water, soil, food, and living organisms, including us.
Yeah.
And microplastics enter our body through ingestion via what we drink, what we inhale, and through skin contact.
Yeah.
Studies have found microplastics accumulating in human blood, the brain, and our reproductive systems. More than 80% of mismanaged plastic waste, that's plastic that's littered, dumped, or otherwise not properly contained, is estimated to be transported by rivers to coastal environments.
Yeah.
So here's something that most people have heard of, is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Sure.
It's the
Yeah.
largest accumulation of ocean plastic in the world,
like-
located between Hawaii and California.
It's like the size of Texas, right? I mean, it's gigantic.
It's huge.
Yeah.
But there is still far less plastic in the ocean than models predict there should be, given how much is produced and lost to the environment each year. In
So-
fact, millions of tons remain unaccounted for.
I was just going to say, where's the missing plastic?
So this is what the Penn State team set out to investigate.
Yeah.
In part, this mystery of the missing plastic.
Yeah.
So surprisingly, samples collected from a rural watershed in Raystown, a largely forested region in central Pennsylvania, exhibited similar microplastic levels to samples taken from the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, which is a watershed located close to Philadelphia International Airport. On average, they found about 1,125 microplastic particles per pound of sediment. But concentration varied widely enough that land use alone can't reliably predict how much plastic can be found in any given waterway. The most abundant types of plastic found were polypropylene and polyurethane, both single-use plastics, along with tire rubber. Single-use plastic or disposable plastic is any plastic item that is just used once.
Right.
Right. Such as, food packaging,
Sure.
bread bags, plastic bottles,
Candy wrappers.
straws, et cetera, and then just thrown in the trash.
Yeah.
Or just thrown along the side of the road, right? They found that microplastic accumulation in Pennsylvania sediment has been doubling roughly every 20 years since 1950, mirroring the rise of global production. Mm-hmm. This was determined by drilling deep into the sediment in reservoirs and estuaries where layers of sediment built up over time like rings in a tree,
Isn't that
older
cool?
material on the bottom, newer material on the top.
Wow.
Analyzing the chemistry of each layer, they could estimate when it was deposited and how much plastic it contained.
Wow.
Centuries from now, they're going to look back at this and they're going to say,
What were they thinking?
right.
Yeah. All right. Great. Well, I have an article about artificial turf.
Oh, okay.
Yep. This is from Sports Illustrated. Says the World Cup has exposed the NFL's turf problem. Now it's time for owners to do right by their players. Less than 5 minutes into the 2023 season that was going to change everything for the New York Jets, their fans were forced to hold their collective breath as Aaron Rodgers sat himself on the turf in disbelief. On just their fourth play from scrimmage, the newly acquired quarterback tore his left Achilles tendon as Bills defender Leonard Floyd took him down for a sack. Season over, done for the year. The devastating turn of events not only put the kibosh on what was expected to be a turnaround season for a Jets team that desperately needed one, but also brought the league's grass versus turf debate to the forefront. Days after Rodgers' injury, the NFL Players Association released a statement that called on the league to mandate the installation of natural grass surfaces in all NFL stadiums. Quote, "It's the easiest decision the NFL can make," unquote, said then Executive Director Lloyd Howell. "The players overwhelmingly prefer it, and the data is clear that grass is simply safer than artificial turf." Nearly 3 years later, however, little has changed. 14 of the league's 30 stadiums are equipped with plastic grass playing surfaces, including East Rutherford, New Jersey's MetLife Stadium, the site of Rodgers' fateful injury, and the one that's long been criticized by players for the staggering number of injuries suffered there. The NFL Players Association recently polled its members and concluded that 92% of them would prefer playing on natural grass fields. This is likely due to both the injury risk that artificial turf surfaces impose and the added wear and tear it brings to players' bodies. Let me just note here that the wear and tear it brings to players' bodies is not the only concern regarding these giant plastic grass fields. There are additional concerns of plastic pollution like you were just talking about.
Absolutely.
You know, microplastics that come off these fields.
That's right. And you know what? And when you have a field where there's no shade from trees, you've got UV radiation exposure. And that's one of the major sources of degradation of plastic.
Yeah, that's what causes the plastic to break down. So you've got it's like a giant experiment. How much microplastic can we produce here?
That's one of the major sources of plastic degradation is UV radiation.
Yeah. Excessive heat is another problem, and the presence of PFAS forever chemicals. Crumb rubber, which is frequently used to cushion these fields, brings its own set of environmental and health issues. And you can learn more about plastic grass fields at our website, grassrootsinfo.org. Anyway, that's the news for this week. We'll be right back.
Are you one of the many people who suffer frequent unexplained headaches, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, and inability to concentrate? Have you considered the possibility that your symptoms may be caused by exposure to the thick web of wireless radiation which envelops our lives? For more than 75 years, beginning with the deployment of radar in World War II, scientists have understood that exposure to radio frequency or wireless radiation can have a wide range of biological impacts on the human body. Most people seem to be tolerant of this exposure at low levels, but as the web of wireless radiation grows even wider and more powerful, an increasing number of people around the world are reporting symptoms.
Now, a team of Australian researchers has attempted to put a number on just how many people are suffering from sensitivity to wireless radiation. Using a random sample of more than 3,000 adults, statistically matched by age, gender, and location to the general populations in Australia, the U.S., and Canada, this study showed that more than 12% are experiencing some degree of sensitivity. Dr. Julie McCredden is a cognitive science researcher, educational designer with advanced degrees in mathematics and psychology, an honors degree in human perception, and a PhD in cognitive science. Dr. McCredden is president of the Oceania Radio Frequency Scientific Advisory Association and was the lead author on this study of sensitivity to wireless radiation. Patti and I had an opportunity to speak with Dr. McCredden earlier this week, and we started by asking her a little bit about her background and how she became involved in this issue. Here's our conversation with Dr. Julie McCredden.
I was working at university as an educational designer, and my background is actually in cognitive science, cognitive psychology, modelling the brain. That was my great love and my great passion, and it remains that. How do we represent concepts in the brain? But everything to do with thinking, reasoning. Anyway, so I modelled the brain using neural networks, which are now the basis of the AI systems that are being used in the world. But anyway, I then went on to an applied area, working in education, trying to help lecturers to teach difficult concepts in ways that could be grasped by students. And one of the tools that I was using for that was technology. It wasn't because I loved technology, it was because I was using it as a tool. Mm-hmm. And the university hygienist came to talk to me about what was going on in my environment. And I couldn't quite believe that people could be affected by it. And he measured my office and he told me that, the levels were slightly high for RF radiation. And the woman across the corridor from me had a miscarriage and the guy next door had a heart attack. And this was after the building had been renovated. So anyway, the radiation physicist sent me some links on it, and I didn't believe it, and I kind of went into denial for a while. But the more that I looked into it, the more I could see that this was an issue. I talked to the IT guys about it, and they were actually not surprised. You would think the IT guys would be the most resistant, but one of them actually worked in the Navy, in an Eastern Bloc country in the Navy, and actually said, no, the men, we knew that if we worked on naval ships, we wouldn't have boys as sons because of the radar.
Really? Well, we know from the research that there are clearly biological impacts of exposure to RF radiation, but the study that you worked on was really about people who are EMF sensitive. So maybe we should talk a little bit about what that means and how that manifests itself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The range of symptoms go from everything from tinnitus to headache to sleep problems to cardio, to aches and pains through the body, skin rashes, fatigue. They call them non-specific symptoms because these are symptoms of many conditions.
Sure.
But they happen in to the point where it becomes debilitating. And when we're talking about headaches, we're talking about migraines to the point of torture, so that people can't operate in and they can't think either. They get brain fog, and that's my interest. They can't operate and think inside an environment where there may be just one modem on, or one person with a phone that's not on airplane mode. And that it's a human rights issue, because those people, they're like the lepers of modern society. They can't function in society. And we need safe spaces where they can function. Workplaces are now making adjustments for people with autism and Asperger's conditions and people with sensory issues, which is also an inflammatory issue, where they have quiet spaces, but they can actually still work and be productive and contribute to the team. Well, it should be possible to make the same type of adjustments for RF, EMF quiet spaces, so that people can still function and be part of the team.
So I'm wondering if your government agency that's supposed to oversee this kind of radiation exposure is doing any better a job than our own FDA and FCC, which so far have pretty much refused to acknowledge any kind of, sensitivity to RF radiation.
Well, it's supposed to look at the issues of radiation and then give advice to the government. It doesn't actually regulate. We have a separate regulatory body, but our regulatory body also gives out the licenses, so they're completely, compliant. So,
sure. Yeah.
Anyway, so Victor Leach, this radiation physicist, and Steve Weller, who was an IT guru, the three of us got together and we decided to start this organisation and also to look into the science of it. And Vic knew about databases, and he basically said, okay, well, let's collect the science, because we know the debate is resting on the science. We've all got scientific skills, research skills. Let's use them for this cause.
I'm fascinated by your statistics or your data showing how many Australians you think are affected by this sensitivity to wireless radiation.
It's quite unexpected. I mean, most of the past studies were done over 10 years ago. Most of the papers that we referenced that had lower statistics, right, they were done up until 2009, though there was a Japanese study done in 2023. But you think about the change in the uptake, how it's ubiquitous. Every child now has a mobile phone from childhood. When these stats were being taken early on, mobile phones belonged to adults and not to all adults in the population, whereas now, children are exposed from cradle to grave. Yeah. So the size of the stats is larger than expected. I mean, the largest number was in Taiwan, 2011, 13.3%. But Germany, 10%. So we kind of found overall people who were either self-diagnosed or a doctor told them that they were sensitive to wireless radiation or electromagnetic fields was about 14%. In the larger picture is that, and if you read Robert Becker's book, he was one of the first biophysicists looking into this, and his research was stopped because of military interests. He describes how the problem is that in medicine in general, in medical research, the focus is on biochemistry. So it's all about how molecules interact with one another in the body at all different levels, from molecular through to cells, through to organs, etc. There's very little emphasis on biophysics, which is the electromagnetics of the human body. And in fact, science doesn't understand very much about it. I mean, they understand that our brain uses electrical impulses. They understand that nerves use electrical impulses, and that the heart, is an electromagnetic device. They understand it in the big picture, but they do not understand it in the very subtle ways. And that's the book Electromagnetic Man by Cyril Smith and Simon Best, that describes how sensitive the body is to electromagnetic fields. You can get down to the picoamps, where people can feel things.
Tiny, yeah.
Some people seem to be affected by the electromagnetic currents going through the earth. There's all of this electromagnetic currents going on all the time, which must influence us. The Schumann resonance that's created by electrical storms, by discharge, bolts of light hitting the ground and creating this pulse, this electromagnetic pulse that's required for sleep, for DNA replication, for all the basic processes. But mainstream medicine doesn't understand it. And the thing is, so how can we say that we understand whether or not people are affected by electromagnetic fields because we don't actually understand how we ourselves respond to them and how they are central to our makeup? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And of course, we had a show last week with Deborah Davis, and we were talking about the fact that all life on Earth evolved with the natural electromagnetic forces that exist on the Earth. In fact, we know that's how animals migrate from place to place, and it's so important to their life. And now we're introducing this whole, in some cases, much, much stronger wave of radiation that they don't understand. And we were talking about how it may disrupt the natural world. And I was going to ask you, how did your background in your understanding of how the brain functions enter into this study?
In the bigger picture, that background has been useful because my real area of interest in this whole field is actually the cognitive effects of wireless technology. The fact that it changes neurotransmitters, the fact that brain pulses are electromagnetic, but it's also that we still don't understand how signals are sent across the brain. The nerve pulses are too slow for the rate of information. It's probably something else. It's probably like we understand now that, the myelin sheathing is carrying information. That's what Robert Becker showed too. And we don't understand how concepts are represented or how they talk to one another. We've got a gross understanding of, this brain region might be for motivation, this brain region
speech,
might be for, hunger and speech and all that, and, or higher cognitive function, but we don't understand how the patterning of the frequencies, the information, how the patterns are combined to make concepts. The fact that electromagnetic fields interact with cognition, it's going to be a complex answer to how that plays out. But the fact that it changes calcium signaling, which then leads to oxidative stress, not just in the brain, but also in the body. And in fact, oxidative stress seems to be a player in all of this because, when you look at the results of our paper, you can see we can look at it both ways, right? We can say, because we didn't just look at EHS self and doctor diagnosed and what wireless sensitivity self-diagnosed, EHS doctor diagnosed. What we did was we looked at other conditions within the people who were either self-diagnosed as being wireless sensitive or told by a doctor that they will probably have electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Just over 80% of those people have multiple chemical sensitivity. Over 70% of them have asthma. 50% of them have autism ASD, and 85% of them have fragrance sensitivity. That's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And if you flip that around and look at it the other way, then what does stats show is that of the people who are chemically sensitive, 40% of them approximately are wireless sensitive or have EHS. A third of the people with asthma, have wireless sensitivity or EHS. Over 70% of people with autism or ASD are wireless sensitive. Wow. Now, that's a huge stats. And 35% of people with fragrance sensitivity also have wireless sensitivity or EHS.
Did you see patterns, or were you able to discern any increase or decrease over time in the studies that you were looking at, or not?
No, because this wasn't a longitudinal study. This was just a study that was conducted in 2022. So we took is what you call a cross-sectional study.
Yep. Okay.
I mean, we could run the study again with the same people again, but probably, you could run the same study again in books. I mean, it looks like then when you compare with the studies that were done over a decade ago, that the figures are going up. We're going down from around the 5% mark up to now over 10% mark of people with this condition. And of course, there's denial of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what has the reaction been? Have you seen any blowback from the industry or anything?
Not yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Not yet. I mean, I'm guessing what industry tends to do with results that are unfavourable is they either ignore them or they run a study of their own, showing that that these results are not realistic or whatever. It's amazing. They run another study, and that's normally you can see that in the database. I mean, really, the response has been very favourable so far. I mean, people have been happy to have updated statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And from an online panel where it's more objective, I guess there's been a surprise because the group that showed relatively the highest proportion of wireless sensitivity or diagnosed EHS were males, age 25 to 34.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, they were, of course, one of the largest groups in the survey, when you look at the distribution of age, but relative percentage-wise, they showed the largest, and especially in the United States, interestingly. And then the next largest group were males, 35 to 44. Now, my concern is that that's the viable workforce. And while industry might, on the one hand, parts of industry might not like this data because it's saying that wireless technology needs to change and the approach needs to change, there's other parts of industry that will care very much that the viable workforce is being affected by the wireless technology that's ubiquitous in the workforce because they're basically undermining the health of their workers.
So are you optimistic about the future? I mean, your study concludes that we have to be more aware of the situation. We need to provide some accommodation for people who are sensitive. Do you think that's going to happen?
I guess I'm more optimistic that in the US that you have a chance of making this an issue for human rights. It's a human rights issue, so that, policy needs to change to recognise it, to protect people against it, to create safe spaces, to make adjustments in workplaces, churches, schools, businesses, so that people with this condition can actually be present. Because there are more and more people becoming sensitive to more and more things.
Dr. Julie McCredden, cognitive science researcher and president of the Oceania Radio Frequency Science Advisory Association. You can learn more about Dr. McCredden and find links to the study at our program website, greenstreetnews.org. That's going to do it for this edition of Green Street. Special thanks to Dr. Julie McCredden and all of you who listen to and support this show. And don't forget our new YouTube channel where you can find dozens of our past shows to share with friends and family. Just search Green Street with Patti and Doug. It'll come right up. Patti and I will be back again next week with another edition of Green Street. Thanks for listening.